All right, so listen, is this just an intimidation tactic on behalf of Beijing?
Absolutely. I mean, Beijing is holding the line that we've talked about before, which is that if the Hong Kong police lose control, Beijing is going to intervene in Hong Kong. That is just a fact. One way that the Hong Kong police have decided to go about trying to break up the protests is banning the rally this weekend, and then arresting 3 attorneys for the protesters, and then 3 of the protesters who are the main leaders. I mean, Joshua Wong is the person in 2014 that rose to fame through the umbrella movement. And so by trying to break up the leadership of the demonstrators, they're hoping to dissipate at least some of the demonstrations and make them not as large scale as they have been in the past. I mean, the Hong Kong police have already said that there are 4,000 demonstrators who they believe to be problematic or potentially violent and threats to Hong Kong. They've already arrested 900 people. I mean, this is a tactic that they're trying to break up the leadership of the protesters.
There's some speculation that this is just the beginning in terms of the arrests that we might see, that this time it was just a handful or, a total of 6 or 7, that it could eventually be thousands.
Oh, absolutely. I think that Beijing, by giving the directive to Carrie Lam that says we're rejecting all 5 of the protesters' demands, and the Communist Party of China giving that directive to her, I think that, they're certain in their resolve about how they're going to go about arresting people to prevent, any sort of, escalation of the protests.
By Carrie Lam taking these concerns, these 5 things, to Beijing, is she putting herself at risk as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, certainly in the eyes of Beijing, that would be an act of weakness, and they would look down upon that. But the main problem that Carrie Lam experiences is that there's kind of the old guard of protesters in Hong Kong and kind of this young Joshua Wong type of protesters, and then she's in the position where she's having to negotiate between Beijing, herself as the Hong Kong, ruling party, and then these demonstrators that are wanting, a certain level of democracy. And the fact that these 3 parties are not seeing eye to eye and are unwilling to communicate because there seems to be, the problem of leaks, the problem of what we're actually trying to consensus, and then Beijing coming in and saying you can't have any of the 5 things. So she's kind of in this tough position negotiating between these 3 parts, and it's sort of an impossible position for her, anyways.
So these protests that were supposed to take place this weekend, these demonstrations, not going to happen. They've been barred, and then, well, the organizers had no choice but to cancel after they were barred. But is this going to just be a temporary lull here? Do you expect things to pick right back up again?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the young demonstrators have shown themselves to be innovative in their tactics with how they want to demonstrate. I mean, the airport was a different tactic than they took there in the 2014 umbrella movement. You have the ways in which they go about protesting, the way they communicate is all very different, and they try to be, like I say, innovative in that way. So I imagine that Joshua Wong is going to recalibrate and come back with some new way that he wants to protest, because I mean their resolve is true, and they're not going to let Beijing push them around. And the fact that they're rejecting all 5 of their demands is plainly going to be unacceptable to them.
And in many ways, listen, they are testing, they're prodding, they're trying to see how they can best go about getting their message across. But when does the point come where Beijing, I mean, they're already arresting people, when does the point where Beijing says that's it, enough's enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've already sort of put into motion, at least rhetorically, what they want to say. I mean, they floated the idea of, oh, there are terrorists among the demonstrators, and there are 4,000, and the police have said that there are 4,000 demonstrators that are problematic in some way. I mean, they're putting out language to suggest that if something violent happens, they're giving cover to when they can come in and they can quell the protest quickly. I mean, you saw that language repeatedly, and Beijing, while unprecedented, is not going to kowtow to this. That's just not going to happen. And so I imagine that if escalation happens, they've put themselves in a position to do that.
All right, so Beijing taking action, but in doing so, do you think that the flip side here is that you're going to see the exact opposite thing happen? Beijing is trying to tamp things down, but it's only going to add fuel to the fire, to the pro-democracy fire, I guess what you would call it. Yeah,
I mean, I think at a certain point, Beijing has got to offer a win for both sides. I mean, obviously this is sort of a temporary battleground till down the road, the ultimate legal question of Hong Kong, and is it going to become consumed into China, or is it going to become its own autonomous region or its own country? And that coming in 2047, I believe. This is sort of a preliminary discussion of that, and they have to come up with a solution of what that's going to look like. It seems like the younger generation is finding that wholly unacceptable to become part of China and subsumed as part of that. So we'll see how that plays out.
Is there a role that the international international community can play here in pressuring Beijing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that President Trump staying out of it and focusing on the trade is the best thing for the president to do right now. I think Xi Jinping wants to keep focus on the trade as well, and I think trying to get the international community to come in and comment on something that really is a legal question for Hong Kong and China, I think is going to make a problematic situation when it comes to President Xi, who's already facing internal strife with the way that he's discussing trade and this Hong Kong problem. I think it's going to make it even more complicated for him.
All right, Tyler Grant, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
We're going to talk a little bit about